faithfully delivering value and exploring the world's best books. Hello, this is Sally Book Talk. Today, I'll interpret the book Nature and Nurture, subtitle Genes, Experience, and What Makes Us Human. The genes in the subtitle represent nature, while experience represents nurture. Oh, this title really sparks a lot of thoughts. For instance, we often say, 3 parts destined by heaven, 7 parts depend on hard work, which seems to show that nurture factors are super important. But then there's another saying, dragons beget dragons, phoenixes beget phoenixes, the son of a rat will dig holes. It seems nature factors are also essential, and this makes people wonder, which one, nature or nurture, has a bigger impact on human growth? Actually, not just for regular folks, but scientists have been debating this issue for hundreds of years. From Darwin to Pavlov, they've always struggled to reach a consensus. The author of this book combines experiments from many scientists to try and clarify things in nature and nurture. The relationship between nature and nurture. The author, Matt Ridley, is a zoology PhD from Oxford University in the UK. Plus, he's a best-selling author whose books have been nominated for multiple literary awards. Richard Dawkins, who wrote The Selfish Gene, called him an outstanding writer who's getting even better. The Economist magazine praised this book, saying, "It offers a fantastic perspective on the nature-nurture war." So, what view will the author give on the relationship between nature and nurture? Next, I'll break it down into 3 parts for you. Part 2, how do humans differ from animals? Part 2, what ultimately determines humans, nature or nurture? Part 3, how do nature and nurture influence each other? First, let's dive into part 1 and discuss how humans differ from animals. If I asked you what's the difference between humans and gorillas, you could list tons of reasons. You use computers for work, you read books to learn, you scroll through social media for fun, and so on. Oh, it's practically endless. Some might even say, open your eyes wide, look at the gorilla, then turn and look at me. Honestly, we're totally different species. Actually, these reasons touch on several aspects of argument. Compared to animals, humans use tools, learn from past experiences, engage in social interactions, or in other words, we're genetically different from gorillas. But unfortunately, these so-called noble human advantages we take for granted simply don't hold up. Oh, this skepticism began back in 1960. That year, a newcomer to science, a young woman born in London named Jane Goodall, arrived at the shores of Lake Tanganyika in Africa to observe chimpanzees. Through her observations, she discovered chimpanzees using grass stalks to eat termites or crushing leaves' spongy tissue to get water. And just like that, the myth that only humans use tools was shattered. Well, even if animals can use tools, let's concede that, but surely animals can't learn, right? But then Goodall also discovered chimpanzees in West Africa's Thai forest, teaching their young across generations how to use wood as hammers to crack nuts. Okay, let's concede even further. Even if animals can use tools and learn basic things, they surely don't have complex social interactions like humans, do they? The answer remains no. Scientists found that infanticide frequently occurs among gorillas. A mateless male gorilla will sneak into a group of females, snatch an infant, and kill it, which affects the mother in 2 ways. First, it stops her lactation and brings her back into estrus. Second, it persuades her to accept a stronger male mate who can better protect her future offspring. So really, who else can this poor gorilla mother choose besides the attacker right in front of her? Thus, she abandons her previous mate and follows the male gorilla who killed her child. Clearly, gorilla social dynamics are incredibly complex, even sophisticated enough for strategic crimes. Undoubtedly, animals do socialize. So when defining human-animal differences, we've retreated step by step, seemingly on tool use, learning, socialization, All these nurtured behaviors fail to draw a clear boundary between humans and animals. Animals truly can resemble humans remarkably. Meanwhile, scientists discovered primitive tribes on Pacific Islands living in raw, uncivilized conditions, or put bluntly, living more like animals. This compels us to ask, are humans and animals inherently different at birth? Scientists at the time were already a bit hesitant on this issue. Fortunately, genes were discovered. So scientists thought to find answers in genes, guessing there must be huge differences between human and animal genes. But it turned out the genetic differences weren't as big as we imagined. And according to genetics research, humans and chimpanzees share up to 98.76% genetic similarity. So, with such small genetic differences, why did humans become rulers of the earth, while chimpanzees with similar genes are kept in cages for us to visit? Such tiny differences seem unable to explain our huge disparities. So, we have reason to suspect that the difference between humans and chimpanzees comes from nurture rather than nature. But the author tells us that ultimately it's still because of genes. Although the genetic content is similar, their arrangement and expression can be different. To give an analogy, it's like cooking with the same ingredients but with slight differences in the method. Even with the simplest rice, depending on the amount of water and different combinations of cooking time, it can be porridge, cooked rice, or crispy rice. So, like cooking, seemingly similar genomes can form different arrangements. The timing of these combinations is determined by something called a promoter. In promoter, promote means to start, and air refers to molecule. So a promoter acts like a switch that determines gene expression, or more accurately, whether a gene functions and when. For example, chimpanzees have distinctive large jaws and flat foreheads. This difference isn't caused by different genes from humans, but by promoters in a very similar set of genes, making chimpanzee jawbones grow longer and skulls shorter than in humans. The difference lies not in the genes themselves, but in the duration of the gene switches being turned on. Combining this from the above descriptions, we can conclude that genes are indeed what cause the difference between humans and animals. But as our understanding deepens, we find that these innate genetic differences need nurture to have an impact. So we have to raise the second question. What ultimately determines a person, nature or nurture? Let's first talk about the importance of nature. How important is nature really? Scientists are trying to study animal instincts to begin their research. Scientists are trying to study animals' instinct for love, which is quite difficult to prove. After all, scientists can't just hold microphones and interview animals about their romantic feelings, right? That scientists have found a hormone called oxytocin. This hormone's concentration often increases after mating. When scientists injected this hormone into mice brains, the male mice immediately started yawning. So at the same time, their genitals became erect, and female mice would adopt mating postures. So scientists have reason to believe this hormone is closely linked to love. Therefore, scientists designed an experiment with two vole species, prairie voles, who are model couples. Once they form a pair, they remain faithful and often gaze into each other's eyes affectionately. After pups are born, the male vole helps care for them until they mature. The other species, montane voles, often have multiple partners and become strangers after mating, not raising young together. Scientists discovered the difference between these voles. Although both produce oxytocin, the unfaithful montane voles lack hormone receptors, preventing their brains from recognizing it. The model prairie voles, however, have abundant receptors and respond to the hormone. So even injecting hormone into montane voles can't stop these promiscuous creatures from seeking pleasure. Through these experiments, while scientists can't claim to have found love's origin, they conclude nature's importance is undeniable. Without innate support, organisms can't even love monogamously. No nurture can make montane voles commit. Similar examples appear in humans too. Speaking of this, let's examine our ring fingers compared to our index fingers. Most men have longer ring fingers than index fingers, while most women's are equal. Scientists found this reflects prenatal testosterone exposure, a hormone affecting libido, strength, immune function, and more. The more testosterone a person is exposed to in the womb, the longer their ring finger will be. You might say, so what? Scientists found male muscles are affected by testosterone, meaning men with longer ring fingers tend to develop more muscle mass. In a running race, scientists predicted the contestant with the longest ring finger would win. So, and that person actually won. Of course, an overly long ring finger isn't always beneficial. Studies show men with very long ring fingers are more prone to autism, dyslexia, stuttering, and immune dysfunction, while men with shorter ring fingers are more susceptible to heart disease and infertility. So your athletic ability or heart disease risk might be determined before birth. You might assume nature only affects physical traits, not mental ones. For example, we often blame mental illness on stress or trauma, rarely considering innate predisposition. But the author reveals that innate factors significantly influence mental illness. The best way to prove genetic influence is through twin studies. There are identical twins who share 100% identical genes, and fraternal twins who share at most half. Twin pairs usually grow up in similar environments. Comparing these twins reveals whether nature or nurture has greater impact. Researchers actually studied 691 twin pairs. Coincidentally, each pair had at least one twin with schizophrenia. Results showed identical twins had an 86% concordance rate for schizophrenia, while fraternal twins only had a 15% concordance rate. This stark difference clearly shows mental illness susceptibility is primarily innate, not due to environment, since all twins shared similar upbringing. Only identical twins share identical genes. So you see, both physical traits and mental conditions are largely predetermined by nature. The examples above seem to suggest innate factors determine our fate. So should we abandon effort and resign to destiny at birth? Absolutely not. While nature's influence is strong, it doesn't negate nurture. In fact, nurture's impact may be even more profound. The most familiar proponent of nurture theory is Russia's Pavlov, known for his famous conditioning reflex principle. Pavlov found that by ringing a bell every time he fed dogs, after repeated pairings, the dogs would salivate at just the bell sound, even without food. This discovery seems simple, but it shows organisms form associations between events, humans included. The experiment sounds unethical today, but scientists did test it on 2 children. At 11 months, a child showed no fear toward a white rat, even enjoyed playing with it. But when scientists suddenly struck steel with a hammer, the child cried in fear. Afterwards, whenever the child touched the rat, they'd strike the steel. Within days, the child cried at just the sight of the rat. This was conditioned fear. It escalated until the child feared white rabbits and even a white sealskin coat. So an innately normal child, through training, became terrified of all white furry objects. This demonstrates the very principle of learning we recognize, proving nurture's potential. Thus, we conclude organisms can change behavior through learning. Not everything is predetermined by nature. Later experiments used human infants, conducted by American psychologist John B. Watson. He firmly believed nurture trumps nature, famously declaring, "Give me a dozen healthy infants raised in my specified environment, and I'll turn any into specialists. Doctors, lawyers, artists, merchants, even beggars or thieves." No matter what his natural talents, hobbies, temper, abilities, race, or ancestors' occupations were, in Watson's view, it seems like everything about nurture can be molded and changed. But in reality, that's not true. Nurture can influence many aspects, but it's not all powerful. In fact, nurture still has plenty of limitations. First off, Changes through nurture still can't escape innate predispositions. Nurture proponents hold the stance that a baby's love for its mother is solely because she provides nutrition. Scientists opposing this claim designed an experiment. 8 baby monkeys were placed in separate cages, each with a wire monkey mother model and a cloth monkey mother model. The cloth monkey mom held a pacifier, while the wire monkey mom held a bottle of milk. If these little monkeys had read nurture theory, they'd quickly link the wire model to food, so they'd fall for the wire monkey mom. However, these monkeys spent nearly all their time with the cloth monkey mom. They only left her for security to drink milk from the wire mom. The cloth monkey mom. In the most extreme case, one baby monkey even clung to the cloth mom with its hind legs while leaning to drink from the wire mom. Clearly, the monkey's innate craving for warmth and security couldn't be replaced by the cold wire mom providing food. Another monkey experiment also proves nurture can't escape innate predispositions. Scientists found wild monkeys usually fear snakes, while captive ones are indifferent. So scientists designed an experiment. They showed edited videos to captive baby monkeys. The videos showed monkeys terrified of snakes, captive monkeys. After watching the monkeys develop fear of snakes, even a plastic model made them back off. Oh, and here's the cool part. If snakes were swapped for flowers in the videos, the captive monkeys didn't fear flowers. Instead, they thought the monkeys in the videos, afraid of flowers, were crazy. Actually, humans are no different. People are more prone to fear spiders, darkness, heights, deep water, confined spaces, and thunder, all dangers from the Stone Age. Modern humans are born with genes that fear these things. Now, consider modern dangers like electrical outlets during snowstorms. Through nurture, we learn they're dangerous, yet we don't develop instinctive fear. Moreover, some nurtured behaviors become as irreversible as innate traits. This sounds surprising. We always assume nurture can be corrected. But actually, no. A newly hatched gosling imprints on the first moving object it sees. It'll persistently follow that object, usually its mother, but sometimes a goateed scientist. Scientist Konrad Lorenz discovered this imprinting effect, where influences during critical development periods become permanent. Sobering experimental setup. Sobering newborn monkey's eyes shut, even for just 1 week. Those eyes became permanently blind. This shows while nurture often allows corrections, missing critical periods brings irreversible consequences. Similar findings occur in humans. We usually assume overweight adults get heart disease, but studies show those with lowest birth weight and weight at age 1 have highest ischemic heart disease mortality later, meaning heart disease links to infant underweight, not adult overweight. Scientists explain this as infantile imprinting. Evolutionary adaptation narrative, the body to expect lifelong food scarcity. It adapts through starvation mode, lowering metabolism, minimizing activity to conserve calories. Yet when this famine-prepared infant grows into food abundance, the body's programming remains. It voraciously consumes but can't metabolize efficiently. This overeating puts tremendous strain on the heart, making heart disease more likely. Both are nurture influences, but critical period impacts are often irreversible. It's like buttoning a shirt. If the first button's wrong, the rest will never align no matter how you adjust. We've covered nature and nurture. Each person is their combined product. So how do nature and nurture influence each other? Truthfully, we often struggle to distinguish their roles, sometimes even reversing their importance. Conventionally, schools should create fairness, equal education, compensating disadvantages, and minimizing nature's impact. That's why parents scramble desperately, buying school district homes for better schools and education. But actually, schooling maximizes innate differences. Due to geography, social class, or income, most students share similar backgrounds. Schools provide similar education too. Thus, schools minimize environment-caused differences. This inadvertently maximizes innate disparities. With equal resources, Performance gaps between students point to genes because that's the only variable left. In equal societies, excellence depends on genes. More equality means greater natural influence. Clearly, nurture sometimes amplifies nature, and nature often requires nurture to manifest. Take obesity inheritance, yes and no. Studies show identical twins raised apart still have 72% weight correlation despite different families. Meaning, if one twin's heavy, the other has 70% obesity likelihood, even with different lifestyles. In other words, obesity genes exist, but don't guarantee becoming overweight. It's not like having a skinny gene means you can indulge in ice cream freely. To be precise, in affluent societies, people have abundant food. Those who gain weight faster must have obesity genes that make them eat more. But in extremely poor and backward areas, starvation is rampant and everyone suffers from hunger. So the few overweight people there are undoubtedly the wealthiest. In other words, in wealthy societies, obesity genes make you gain weight easier, while in poor societies, wealth is the foundation for weight gain. IQ research shows the same pattern. In IQ tests, the poorest children generally score lower, especially compared to affluent kids. This is undeniable. Nurture has a bigger impact on intelligence, but among kids from families earning $100,000 or $400,000 yearly, intelligence differences are minimal. For a direct example, your genetic IQ might be 180, but with poor living and education conditions, even if you're brilliant, your final IQ drops to 100. And this situation obviously doesn't happen to rich kids. To rephrase a popular saying, with most poor people's living conditions, they never even get to compete based on talent. Or, to put it another way, nurture is like vitamin C. If you lack it, things go bad. But once you have enough, more won't help. The rest depends on innate genes. Since nature and nurture are so tangled, how should we view them? First, for nature, we should see it as an enabler. What is an enabler? It's what gives us capabilities. Without oxytocin receptors, animals can't have faithful love. For an analogy, genes are like a phone's specs. A high-end phone lets you shop online or listen on Himalaya. Compared to a low-end phone that only calls, you can do more, but it doesn't mean having a high-end phone forces you to shop or listen. Genes give us possibilities, but the conditions to trigger these possibilities still need nurture. Second, for nurture, do what you can, even though it can't escape nature's preset and some conditions can't be changed. But hey, we still have parts we can control. Human growth is always a probability game. Even with schizophrenia genes, you've got high odds of mental illness. But if life goes smoothly, you might avoid triggering it. Even without obesity genes, daily feasting might not make you super obese, but your belly will thank you by growing. Never forget how nature and nurture interact. Debates often treat genes as nature and environment as nurture, separate domains, but they're actually inseparable. So which matters more, nature or nurture? It's actually a false dilemma. Genes work through environment. In a way, nature's designed for nurture, like crocodiles and turtles, whose sex is determined by egg incubation temperature that flips genetic switches. Environment causes their sex, but genes built the mechanism. Genes are both outcome and cause. Let's wrap up with the author's analogy. Like the Nile, formed by countless tributaries, none claiming sole origin. Human nature, too, has no single cause. Both nature and nurture shape it. All right, that's our interpretation of nature and nurture. Check notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.